Good afternoon, and thank you very much for joining us. As soon as we learned of the new Omicron variant, this government acted, introducing targeted and proportionate measures as a precaution, whilst our scientists discovered more, and we're learning more every day. We don't yet know Omicron's severity, its exact rate of transmission, nor indeed the full effectiveness of our vaccines against it. But since I last spoke to you, it's become increasingly clear that Omicron is growing much faster than the previous Delta variant, and it's spreading rapidly all around the world. 568 cases have been confirmed through genomic sequencing across every region of the UK, and the true number is certain to be much higher. Most worryingly, there is evidence that the doubling time of Omicron in the UK could currently be between 2 and 3 days. And while there are some limits on what we can learn from South Africa because of the different rates of vaccination, different rates of previous infection, we're seeing growth in cases here in the UK that now mirrors the rapid increases previously seen in South Africa. And South Africa is also seeing hospitalizations roughly doubling in a week, meaning that we can't yet assume that Omicron is less severe than previous variants. So while the picture may get better, and I sincerely hope that it will, we know that the remorseless logic of exponential growth could lead to a big rise in hospitalizations and therefore, sadly, in deaths. And that's why it's now the proportionate and the responsible thing to move to Plan B in England, while continuing to work closely with our colleagues in the devolved administrations, so we slow the spread of the virus, buy ourselves the time to get yet more boosters into arms, and especially in the older and more vulnerable people, and understand the answers to the key outstanding questions about Omicron. So, first, we will reintroduce the guidance to work from home. Guidance to work from home. Employers should use the rest of the week to discuss working arrangements with their employees, but from Monday, you should work from home if you can. Go to work if you must, but work from home if you can. And I know this will be hard for many people, but by reducing your contacts in the workplace, you will help slow transmission. Second, from this Friday, we will further extend the legal requirement to wear a face mask to most public indoor venues, including theatres and cinemas. There will be, of course, exceptions where it's not practical, such as when eating, drinking, exercising, or singing. Third, we'll also make the NHS Covid pass mandatory for entry into nightclubs and venues where large crowds gather, including unseated indoor venues with more than 500 people, unseated outdoor venues with more than 4,000 people, and any venue with more than 10,000 people. The NHS Covid pass can still be obtained with 2 doses, but we will keep this under review as the boosters roll out. And having taken clinical advice since the emergence of Omicron, a negative lateral flow test will also be sufficient. As we set out in Plan B, we will give businesses a week's notice, so this will come into force in a week's time, helping to keep these events and venues open at full capacity, while giving everyone who attends them confidence that those around them have done the responsible thing to minimise risk to others. As Omicron spreads in the community, we will also introduce daily tests for contacts instead of isolation, so we keep people safe while minimising the disruption to daily life. And of course, we will take every step to ensure our NHS is ready for the challenges ahead. But the single biggest thing that every one of us can do is to get our jabs, and crucially to get that booster as soon as our turn arrives. 1 year to the day since the UK became the first country in the world to administer a COVID vaccine into the arms of Margaret Keenan, we've opened up the vaccine booster to all those over 40, and we're reducing the gap between second dose and booster to a minimum of just 3 months. Our heroic NHS staff and volunteers have already done almost 21 million boosters, including reaching 84% of all the eligible over 80s. But we need to go further and faster still, because our scientists are absolutely confident that your immune response will be stronger if you've been boosted. And while you're at it, please get your flu jab too. Let's do everything we can to protect ourselves and our loved ones this winter and to reduce the pressures on our NHS. As we learn more, so we will be guided by the hard medical data around 4 key criteria: the efficacy of our vaccines and our boosters, the severity of Omicron, the speed of its spread, and the rate of hospitalizations. We will constantly monitor the data and keep it under review. And of course, we must be humble in the face of this virus. But if, and indeed as soon as, it becomes clear that the boosters are capable of holding this Omicron variant, and we've boosted enough people to do that job of keeping Omicron in equilibrium, then we will be able to move forward as before. So please, everybody, play your part and get boosted. I'm now going to hand over to Chris to do the slides.
Thank you, Prime Minister. First slide, please. I wanted to situate this initially on where we are with Delta, because what's happening is Omicron is coming on the back of a still high rate of Delta transmission and hospitalisation. So in the first slide, what we have is the number of people testing positive for COVID in the UK, and that has been drifting upwards, not at a very rapid rate, but it has been drifting upwards. The Omicron data aren't really going to be visible in this for a few days, but they will become visible over time. Next slide, please. The number of people in the hospital with COVID in the UK has, because of the booster vaccination programme in particular, been drifting down until this point in time, with the numbers going into hospital reducing, although that's now stabilised slightly. And that's really because the boosters are particularly going to protect and are protecting people who are in the highest risk categories, as the Prime Minister has said. Next slide, please. And the number of people in the UK who are dying has again gradually been decreasing over time, but is still a daily average of 121 deaths from COVID. So we still have a significant issue with COVID, and I think anybody who speaks to anyone working in the NHS would say that is on top of an incredibly busy system. Next slide, please. In terms of our major countermeasures, of course, the biggest one, as the Prime Minister has said, is boosting. And this is steadily increasing. So we now have over a third of those who are eligible have already had a booster, and they are, by and large, the most vulnerable third. But there's still people who are in higher risk groups who have not been boosted. And of course, we have to move down those groups. And that is going to become absolutely critical, we think, as we move on into a period when Omicron becomes significant and probably then becomes dominant. Next slide, please. And if this is just a data just to show quite how effective, with the variants we've had to date, vaccination can be. And what it compares is, in the dark lines, the hospitalisation rate in the blue-black bars in those who are unvaccinated, and in the orange bars, those who are vaccinated with 2 doses. This is largely protecting against Delta. But as you can see, at every age, a really substantial improvement in your protection. Next slide, please. So now we move on to the data on Omicron, and these are data probably people have seen versions of in media over the last few days, but I think they do need fleshing out a bit. So these are the number of people testing positive for COVID-19 in South Africa. At this point in time, the big increase in COVID in South Africa is virtually all the Omicron variant. And this is now spread all around South Africa. And as you can see, this is an incredibly steep increase in rates. And we're now seeing this translating into increases in hospitalisation. So, for example, I was talking to some of my colleagues from South Africa this afternoon, and they were saying that informal data still to be added to, but there was around about a 300% increase on hospitalisations over the last week. So some of those will have come in with Omicron, and some of them will come in as a result of Omicron. But the fact is those numbers are going up very sharply. Next slide, please. So what's happening here in the UK? Well, I'm afraid that the data here are now clear. What you can see here is the number on the left, and on the right the percentage of cases with what's called S gene target failure. This is a marker for Omicron. Virtually all the cases now who've got this marker will have Omicron. A very small number at the bottom will not. And as you can see, whether you look at the absolute count or the percentage, this is going up incredibly fast now. And as the Prime Minister has said, this is doubling at this point in time. It may slow down, and the aim of the measures announced by the Prime Minister is to slow things down, but it's doubling currently between 2 and 3, every 2 and 3 days. That is an extraordinarily fast rate, and you therefore can get, with very small numbers to very large numbers, really quite quickly. Now, the question obviously people reasonably want to ask is, will this feed through to people in hospital, and how quickly? And I think I'd just like to just point out 2 realities. First of all, the first one is a good one. At the moment, the spread is in younger people who you would not expect to go into hospital, and it's once it starts moving up the ages and into vulnerable groups that you'll start to see that. So there will be a lag as it moves into more vulnerable groups. And then we know from previous waves, and this is not particularly surprising, that there is a delay between people becoming infected with COVID and ending up with symptoms and then with hospitalisation. So there's usually about a 2-week delay. We would therefore not expect that these cases, that the case rates in hospital will start to go up for a number of probably 2 to 3 weeks. And in that period, if you're doubling up at the speed we're talking about now, we move from very small numbers to really substantial numbers, and it will keep on doubling. And that really is the reason why these measures have been announced by the Prime Minister as agreed by ministers today. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Chris. Patrick, anything you want to add? Okay, good.
See the headlines as they happen and watch BBC News live in the app and get the full story with bbc.co.uk/news. Follow the story for all the latest with BBC News.